Luthen Rael was one of the most interesting and compelling characters in Star Wars Andor. I loved getting to know him a little bit more every episode, peeling back the layers and unraveling the mystery surrounding him. As we did that, I had more and more problems with him. I want to make it clear, I mean the character and his actions and how they fit into the Rebel Alliance. I do not mean I had a problem with the writing or the acting or the execution. All of that was amazing. I have a problem with his philosophy and how he chooses to fight the Empire. I became more and more critical of his methods as the season went on. A couple people, like Luke's comment here, suggested I break down my issues with him, and I think that's a good idea, so this is my attempt. I think we have to start with what might have been Luthen's best scene, his speech about sacrifice delivered in the bowels of Coruscant. It's phenomenal, so let's dive into some specific pieces. He talks about how he got to where he was because of his anger, his ego, and his eagerness to fight. Right away, that is not where you want a Star Wars hero to be at. Fear, anger, and aggression are the three big no-no emotions Yoda warns Luke about. It's not that you can't feel them. To be scared and to be angry are human, but once you let those emotions control your actions, then you're in trouble. Anger and aggression are at the root of Luthen's motivations, and he also tells Saw that he's a coward, so he ticks all three boxes. Ego is also central to Star Wars, selfish versus selfless. At least when he began to formulate his rebellion, Luthen was driven by some level of selfishness. He says he yearned to be a savior without contemplating the cost. His goals were noble. Defeating the Empire is worth striving for, I want to make that clear, but he wanted to be glorified for it. Later on in the speech, he admits that the ego that drove him will now never have the audience it wished for. I think he has given up on that, but he definitely still has an ego on him. I've talked for weeks now about my frustration that Luthen is playing a game of chess with people's lives. He weighs the value of Anto Kreegyr and 30 soldiers against the value of having one informant in the Imperial Security Bureau. To him, the soldiers might as well be pawns, Kreegyr is probably a knight or something, and Lonnie Young is a rook. And who is Luthen himself? He's the king. He is the piece that cannot ever be captured, or else the game is lost. Every consideration comes down to him and his safety. Like I mentioned, he told Saw that he's a coward, but he lets Kreegyr die because he can't be hurt if that man is captured. He wouldn't let Saw die because Saw knows too much. He wants to kill Cassian, a man who helped Luthen in his goals and kept his word, but he knows too much, so he should be killed. Those aren't the actions of a hero. Irvin Kershner, director of The Empire Strikes Back, said, Leia's rebel forces will not do anything in order to win. They will not sacrifice lives. They do not descend to the level of the enemy. That's the difference between the rebels and the Empire. It's possible to fight because you love, not just because you hate. So at his core, Luthen Rael is antithetical to the way the Rebel Alliance operates. By his own admission, he has sacrificed love. He has condemned himself to descend to the level of the enemy, to use their own tools to defeat them. I brought up Yoda's speech to Ezra in Star Wars Rebels a lot while reviewing Andor, but it is incredibly relevant. Winning a game or an argument or a fight or a battle or a full-on war is not as important as how you choose to win. So much of Star Wars is about knowing when the time calls for diplomacy and when the time calls for action. Star Wars is not pro-war, but it knows that sometimes that is the only option. And then when that time comes, how do you fight without losing your soul? Luthen doesn't really give any consideration to whether or not he is winning the right way. He has already admitted to damning himself. He already lost his soul, and he has accepted that. Okay, great, cool speech, but owning up to your crappy methods doesn't excuse you from their consequences. You don't get to wash the blood off your hands and be done with it. And honestly, I don't think that's how Luthen truly feels deep down. I think he delivered that speech to Young to make himself sound like this great martyr. Again, it's an amazing monologue, but we see Luthen doubt himself throughout the season. He coldly tells Mothma that Aldhani and the suffering to come is all necessary. Then when she leaves, his face falls. We get some quiet moments with the man where I think he is wondering if it really has to be this way. And the fact is, it doesn't. He has spent so much time building a network of rebels that don't really know each other or who he truly is. We just saw that he was starting to get the various rebel cells to cooperate, but the point is, he has not built a community willing to work together to fight the Empire. One of Andor's central themes is the power of community, whether it's Cassian's close friends willing to help him on Ferrix, or the 7 people that teamed up for the Aldhani heist, or the thousands of people who liberated the prison on Narkina 5, or of course, the citizens of Ferrix gathered to listen to the final words of Marva Karasi Andor. Luthen hasn't cultivated anything even remotely like that. He keeps secrets from those closest to him. Mothma doesn't know for sure he was responsible for Aldhani, neither does Young or Saw. Luthen trusts no one, and because of that, he doesn't have any trust or loyalty in return. But then he goes to Ferrix to kill Cassian at his own mother's funeral, and there he sees the power a community has. The power even one member of a community has to inspire. We see him watching and listening to the words of Marva, and then he flees the fighting. The heist on Aldhani was meant to force the Empire's hand, to make them bring the boot down on planets like Ferrix, to make the people push back. Luthen gets what he wanted. I think he is happy about that on some level, but I don't think he can feel so callously about it witnessing it firsthand. It's easy to tell Mon Mothma, well yeah, people are gonna suffer and that's just too bad when you're safe in your shop on Coruscant, but when you're in the thick of the fighting, when you're watching the explosions and the blaster shots, it's not so easy to shrug off. So I think my big problem with Luthen is that he has completely lost sight of the reason behind fighting the Empire. It's to protect the people it hurts. He may have never had sight of that the way he talks about his ego, but I'm hopeful that his experiences on Ferrix may have changed him for the better. I think that'll be tough for him. He seems resigned to having lost his soul, but come on, Star Wars loves its redemption stories, and I think it would be great to see some redemption play out for someone who was always on the right side of the fight against the Empire. I do want to admit that I think Luthen's methods are effective. That doesn't excuse them, but I understand where he's coming from. The Empire has been growing in strength for 15 years, and nobody was doing anything. I understand his urgency and his desperation. I understand how a person gets to that breaking point. I think that's the other side of the struggle of knowing when it's time to stand and fight. There's a great scene in the show The Good Place where the people in charge of the afterlife realize there's a problem that needs to be solved, and they're so worried about how to solve it the right way that they think it'll take thousands of years, and in that time, countless people will be sent to the bad place to suffer, which is what helps make Luthen such a compelling character. I've said many times now that I think the series presents him as a necessary figure, someone that unfortunately may have to exist in the real world in the fight against oppression. Meanwhile, Mon Mothma is the ideal leader, or she will be. She eventually becomes the kind of person who stands in the Senate and publicly denounces the Emperor, then goes on the run so she can deliver a message to the entire rebel network that Luthen helped create. Every individual rebel cell working independently. Mothma messages them all and says, let's do this thing for real. Meet me at these coordinates, and then 2 years later, the Death Star is destroyed. I think Luthen Rael will pave the way for Mon Mothma, and I hope he regains his soul before his journey ends. But those are my thoughts on the character. Again, he is fascinating. I love watching him. Stellan Skarsgård crushes the performance. The character frustrates me, but in the way that he is meant to. I love the character. But yeah, I do bash him, because I think he can be better. Here at the end, I also want to point out that I have seen a lot of differing interpretations of Luthen's portrayal, especially his moments on Ferrix. I don't want to act like my view is the only view. No, it's just mine. Plenty of fans have disagreed with my take, and I honestly love that. I love that this show has provoked actual good discussion surrounding its themes and characters. I have read opposing comments, and I'm like, yeah, I can see that point of view too. I love the debate that has popped up because I think that is absolutely the point of the character, to make us all think and talk with one another. So let me know what you think of Luthen in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for all our Andor coverage, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page for our video reactions and audio commentaries for every episode. And you can check out this playlist for all of our existing Andor content. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.